Hey, thank you so much for dropping by Going Deep with Aaron Watson. Please hit subscribe if you've not already done so. There are a ton of great episodes coming on down for this show, but today is a particularly special one. You've probably heard of Teach for America, you've probably heard of the Peace Corps, and you've probably heard of a number of other postgraduate programs that are brief stints in different arenas designated for recent college grads who quite frankly don't know what they want to do with themselves. Nothing against any of those programs, but Venture for America, which was created by Andrew Yang, is a different take on that where recent college grads are embedded in fast-growing startups to get a taste of what an entrepreneurial experience is like, build a network, learn valuable skills, and get their feet wet before going on to start businesses of their own. Our modern times are filled with examples of people taking on massive amounts of debt to head to college and graduate school to get an education that will help them in the real world. But Andrew Yang knows through experience that the real world education is often more valuable. So his organization facilitates that by placing recent grads in different startups all across the country and not exclusively in the designated startup hotbeds like San Francisco. We had an excellent conversation. He is a really, really smart guy, and I also strongly recommend his book, Smart People Should Build Things. And after our interview, I had a brief conversation with Jenny Sharp, who is a Venture for America fellow currently stationed here in Pittsburgh. So make sure you stay tuned and pay attention for the whole thing. You're not going to want to miss this conversation with Andrew Yang.
So Andrew, thank you so much for coming on my podcast. Really excited to have you today.
Oh, glad to be here. Congrats on this.
Thank you. I want to start off with your book, Smart People Should Build Things, which I devoured upon receiving from you back in 2015. And one of the really big ideas that you support in your writing is that entrepreneurial endeavors as a kind of lifestyle are often misunderstood. And people see someone going off doing a venture and it failing in this vacuum. And you kind of flipped that around and explained that someone who goes down such a route in the process of trying to make their venture work builds this really robust, diverse network that can support them, maybe give them a job if they fail, and also kind of give them a skill set that they wouldn't necessarily have if they took some other routes that people traditionally do as they leave school. So I wanted to just kind of start things off. And basically the idea that you posit is that makes this kind of move less risky than many people perceive it to be. So I'd love it if you could just talk a little bit about how your experiences informed this opinion and how you developed it before you put it into writing.
Well, like you, I started a business in my 20s, and in my case, the business didn't work out. But during that time, I developed a ton of both capacities and relationships that ended up really changing my approach to work, changing my outlook, changing my sense of risk. And those changes really are still with me today. Today I'm 41, so starting that company when I was 25 shaped me for the next 16 years. So I know from experience that if you start a business, the facile thing is to think you're going to meet a ton of people, which you completely will. But the more important thing and the more profound thing is it will actually change you. It will change your wiring. It will make you capable of very different things and put you in position to take on very different responsibilities.
Absolutely. That's been my experience in starting this, and I'm sure many people have similar experiences. We're going to get caught up to the actual founding of Venture for America, but you before that went on and served as the CEO and president of Manhattan GMAT, a test prep company. Can you talk a little bit about your experience there and what you learned helping grow a young company into a substantial enterprise with a successful acquisition?
Well, after my company flopped, I needed a job and I wanted to try and get better at building a company. So I worked for a healthcare software company for a CEO named Manu Kapoor. It was a very small company. There were 4 of us when I joined. The company raised several $1 million and grew significantly from when I joined. And during that time, I was moonlighting as a GMAT instructor for a friend's company called Manhattan GMAT that later became Manhattan Prep. And so I was the first instructor. I would teach on weekends. I did it in part because it was a great source of supplementary income. And having gone down the startup road, I thought to myself, well, like the more sources of income I have, the better. And my startup day job wasn't paying me that well. So teaching the GMAT over those years, I became friends with Zeke. And then when he decided to start a charter school and leave Manhattan Prep, he asked me to take over. So that was a phenomenal opportunity. When I joined Manhattan GMAT as an executive, it was still a pretty small company, and I spent 5.5 years building it location by location and teacher by teacher to try and make it into the best and strongest company I could.
And the company was successfully acquired in 2009 by the Washington Post and Kaplan. But moving on, you've clearly defined this path and had a number of these entrepreneurial endeavors yourself. What sparked or what was the catalyst for wanting to create a program that would give this opportunity or entice more people to go in a similar direction to which you'd gone down?
Well, it's funny how everything builds on past experience, and you'll experience this too. I'm sure many people listening to this podcast even have glimmers of it, even if they're quite young. So I went from being an unhappy lawyer to a failed entrepreneur, and then a startup executive. And to your earlier question about building Manhattan Prep, at that point I'd run a company, albeit unsuccessfully, and then helped a healthcare software company grow. And so I felt like I had some of the tools necessary to help Manhattan GMAT grow. And I learned really by apprenticeship. One of the things someone told me a long time ago was that you end up with your boss's voices inside your head over time. And by the time you're in your 30s, you have a few voices if you've worked for a few people. So a lot of your early professional development is about trying to get both those voices to be, informative, and also to develop your own judgment and instincts. And so by the time my company was acquired in 2009, I knew that there were a ton of, like me, directionless yet ambitious college graduates who wanted to learn to build businesses. I knew that early stage companies had a really hard time recruiting them because when I was at Manhattan GMAT, we had a hard time recruiting and we were in New York. So then if you extrapolate that to early stage companies in Pittsburgh, Providence, Baltimore, Detroit, New Orleans, the difficulties even more present. And then and so I thought, well, if we could provide a runway to get some of the same experiences I got, where as a young person I worked for an entrepreneur and then got seasoning, and then that prepared me to successfully run a company, I thought that we could really provide a training ground for young people that would lead them to become business builders, founders, managers, and leaders.
In creating this, was it something where you already had the network of potential investors or just kind of getting this off the ground? Because it's such a big idea. I think that a lot of the times people out there can be, I don't want to say hesitant, but maybe almost intimidated by the size of their idea and how big of a change that they want to make. I would love to learn more just about the obstacles in getting it off the ground, or how the kind of initial stages of VFA worked, because now we're not going to say that it's, a complete success. I'm sure you have much more work and much more progress that you'd like to make, but those initial steps are often the most opaque and hard to see from the outside, but can be the most enlightening for a lot of people.
Yeah, and this really goes back to your first question, Aaron, where let's say that you try and build a company over a couple of years in your 20s, and it doesn't work out, which is what happened to me. But you remember all of those steps. You remember going to people and saying, hey, here's what I'm working on. Here's what I need from you. Dealing with that ambiguity, hiring your first person, your second person. So I remembered all of those steps, when I was starting Venture for America, and thought, okay, I'm going to do this again. But this time I've got experience running a company under my belt. So one of the giant mistakes that people make is they think, let's say in my case, I want to start Venture for America, and now there are all of these great institutions and individuals that support Venture for America. So you might think, oh, that guy must have known those people and institutions before getting going. But it's really the reverse, where the reason why I know those people is because I started Venture for America. I did not know 80 to 90% of the people that currently support Venture for America prior to starting Venture for America. If I started a pizza shop, and you were to come back 5 years later, I would know all these people that supply pizza shops and, come into the pizza shop. But starting out, you probably don't know a lot of those people. It's one of the great and invigorating aspects of trying to build a business and going down this path is that at the beginning, you're not going to know a lot of the people you need to know. You're not going to know a lot of the things you need to know. You just need to take that first step and then the second step. And then over time, you'll build both the relationships and skills that you need to give it an honest chance. Not to say you'll necessarily be successful, but at a minimum, you'll build all these muscles that you would not have a chance to build otherwise.
And you give the opportunity to these Venture for America fellows to build similar muscles over the course of their 2-year period with the startups that they're embedded with. I'd love it if you could unpack for listeners a little bit about how you find these fellows, how you vet them, and how you choose which ones will end up being a part of the program.
Yeah, so in that first year, it was just me going to campuses, making the case hey, if you want to learn to build a business, you're better off spending time with someone who's building a business rather than going to a consulting firm or a big company. That it's a very different look. Today, we had, this past year, we had almost 1,400 applicants for 170 spots from campuses around the country. So today, I'm happy to say there's a real following on campuses where folks know that if they want to learn how to build a business and do some good, Venture for America is a good route. So today, we have a harder time really trying to figure out who we want to take than finding people. Though we always do need more of the right people. So if you know anyone and you're listening to this podcast, or you yourself are someone who wants to learn how to build a business, then please do apply to Venture for America. But we're in the fortunate position now where we can be we've always been very selective. It's just that now we've got a pretty strong base and a following.
And you've always got to balance the supply and demand. You can have a number of applicants, but you also have to find the business partners to host these fellows. Has that been a challenge, or how would you compare the two challenges of finding applicants and potential fellows versus finding potential startups to partner with?
Every year at Venture for America, we've just been guided by the talent piece. And I'll give you an example. This past year, we have 170 of some of the brightest, most idealistic, most enterprising, most high character young people in the country, including a number in Pittsburgh that you've met. And so let's say that, this past year there were 170. Let's say that instead of 170, there'd been 180 or 190 or 200. If you get the right people, companies will fall all over themselves trying to hire them. That's been our outlook. So we just try and find the best people we can above an absolute bar. And that bar being hey, this person can help just about any company grow and succeed. And so if we get those people, then the companies will take care of themselves, has been our attitude. Whereas if you take the reverse, it's impossible. If you had companies that were hey, we need people, then you end up making compromises. And so as it is right now, being frank, we disappoint a lot of companies because we have twice as much demand for talent as we do fellows, and that's the way we like it. We don't have any. It's not like the companies are our partners and we love them, but it's not like we rely upon them for our funding or existence. So, and a lot of businesses end up in tough spots because they feel like they have to do something, whereas we don't feel that pressure at all. We just try and find awesome people. And then if you find awesome people, the rest will take care of itself.
I totally agree. And I think that's also enlightening for folks who are in that space of maybe being in the job hunt and can't figure out where they want to go or where the opportunities are. And the truth that if you continue to work on yourself and build your skills and make yourself an asset and a resource, something will come to you. People will find you. It's really being focused on that personal development that will lead to the opportunities that you're looking for.
Yeah, that's what it seems like very much a theme of going deep. And, I appreciate that advice a great deal because I've lived it and I agree with it.
Absolutely. Another thing that I want to make sure that we mention is Generation Startup. It's a movie that follows some members of the Venture for America community and really takes people to the front lines of entrepreneurship in America. I watched the trailer for it at Thrival 2016 and got really fired up. Can't wait to see the whole thing. But I wanted to maybe just break down a little bit behind the motivation of creating that and what you hope to accomplish with the film and your support or partnership with it.
Yeah, so we were very lucky where a producer approached us about making this film in 2014, and we had very little to do with it in many respects, where they had full creative control. There's an Oscar-winning director who co-directed the film, and then the other director is an Oscar-nominated producer. So they're just very, very high-level creatives. My hope was just that they'd tell the stories of our young people in entrepreneurship generally, because there's just so much misleading stuff out there. And I'm happy to say I really think they knocked it out of the park, where Generation Startup captures what it's actually like to be an entrepreneur better than anything else I've seen. So can't wait for you to see it in Pittsburgh in full. It's screening around the country in various venues, and I'm having a blast with it. I'm actually heading out to the West Coast for screening at LinkedIn later this week, which is going to be a lot of fun. So the film, do check out the trailer if you haven't seen it and you're listening to this. Generation Startup's the best movie about entrepreneurship I've ever seen. And I'm just glad that we're a part of it. We didn't have much to do with it aside from happily being the subject of it.
Yeah, we'll be sure to link to the trailer in the show notes. I'm really curious if you could expand a little bit on some of the misleading things or maybe myths about entrepreneurship that you think the movie dispels.
Well, one myth is that entrepreneurship is about creativity, that people have some great idea, and then that's the bulk of the value. Most entrepreneurship's about just grinding it out. And the movie does depict that, though it's a really funny, humor. It's a good movie. I guess if you describe it like that, but it just cuts to the truth of it much more so, and also cuts to the fact that there's a lot of internal conflict. I think that's another thing, that the depiction is that there's a certitude to entrepreneurship, or that these people are visionaries and they know exactly what's going to happen. But there's a lot of personal stuff that goes on with just about any entrepreneurship story. And so much of entrepreneurship is about knowing yourself and coming to grips with those challenges, being able to balance both the struggle and the possibility. So, and another thing that the movie touches on is how gender and race play into entrepreneurship settings and startups generally. So I think that there's a myth that entrepreneurship is just about personal qualities or grit and determination, but a lot of times there are really many relationships and opportunities that only come with a certain degree of exposure or access or education. So there are different things that the movie touches on that I think really make it a much more honest treatment than most anything else out there.
Yeah, I think that one thing that can surround entrepreneurship, or maybe I even see it sometimes in like the sales world, is that it's a purely merit-based system. If you create something great or have a great pitch or whatever it may be, then the rest will work itself out. And while there is, a fundamental kind of meritocracy baked into it, there's also the reality that different people from different backgrounds, different genders, different races have different privileges that can make that path easier or harder. And I think it's really good that that acknowledgement's being made.
Yeah, well, one of the stories in the documentary is about this guy from an immigrant family whose parents are giving him a hard time all the time about the choices he's making, and I could relate to that. So that there are things like that people don't really think about, and as parents essentially are like, like it's not for you to be an entrepreneur, like you should just go get a good job, and the guy disagrees. So there are a lot of really interesting insights in the movie that I think people will appreciate.
I like it. We don't have too much more time, Andrew, but I want to unpack a little bit more for folks out there who may be too old to sign up for VFA, or just tend to be more of a do-it-yourselfer as opposed to applying. What principles or what lessons are you actively teaching the fellows, or would you hope that other young, entrepreneurially interested or minded folks learn or be aware of or go pursue learning to maybe increase their odds of success? I think that one thing that I also noticed just with the model for VFA is that hopefully there is a lot less debt being taken on if people aren't going to graduate school, law school, business school, whatever it may be, and going directly into these real world educations. They're not maybe grabbing as much student debt, not that they aren't doing it for undergrad. But is there any other principles or pieces of advice that you find yourself giving other young entrepreneurially minded folks when you're speaking with them?
Well, I love what you said about the fact that, we have an education system right now that loads people up with debt, takes place in a classroom to a very high degree, and is serving really institutional purposes quite often, as opposed to personal purposes. Like Venture for America, there's no cost to the people in the program, thanks to our incredible funders. But that was always very important to me. And that right now as a society, we're emphasizing degrees in classroom learning to the exclusion of apprenticeship and other things that really have been proven to work in other contexts. And the thing that we try and impart with Venture for America, which happens very naturally, I'm happy to say, is a high degree of action orientation and a real sense of what it takes to build something of value, commercially. Because most people, particularly when you're coming out of school, you can write reports, you can do things that, use your brain, but most things that happen out there in the world require a combination of brains and muscle or action, and that one of the big lessons I'm sure you've learned, Aaron, and that I learned when starting my company was just what it takes to make something happen. And that's what our fellows get because they're working for these companies that demand that of them pretty consistently day in and day out.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a mentor here in Pittsburgh, and when I first started, I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks in a row, I saw him, and the first question he asked me was, how long do you think this is going to take? And, when I was starting, I was like, oh, it's going to be completely up and running and perfect in 3 months or 6 months. And slowly but surely, as the weeks went by in the launch phase, you realize, oh, this is going to take a lot longer. But the other realization that comes with that is, particularly with these VFA fellows, if you're starting young, you have a long runway with which to grow, with which to build, and to get to wherever it is that you're eventually targeting. So I just want to say, Andrew, I commend you for this program and the inspiration that it is, and just the message. Even if people just see the cover of your book, Smart People Should Build Things, I think that that's a powerful message. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing and for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Aaron. Please do send anyone awesome to ventureforamerica.org. We'd love to have them, and I think people are going to love the movie. Anyone who's interested in entrepreneurship will enjoy the heck out of it.
Fantastic. We'll be sure to link to the website, your social media, and the trailer, all that good stuff in the show notes at goingdeepwithaaron.com/podcast. But Andrew, as we do at the end of every episode before I let you go, I'd love to give you the mic one last time so that you can issue a personal challenge for the audience.
Yeah, so I think that there's a lot of hype around starting your own company. There's so many things that happen that really don't involve starting your own company. So the challenge I would lay out for whoever's listening to this is just find one company or store even that's doing something you're excited about and commit to doing one concrete thing that will help them. And if everyone does that, then the world's going to be a much, much better, happier, stronger place. Too often you see something, you're like, oh, that's great, and then you just don't do anything about it. Just commit to doing one concrete thing that's going to help some organization that you value and care about.
I absolutely love it. In one of the networking groups that I'm in, we always start off by shouting out great local businesses that are doing cool work and recognizing your influence and your ability to maybe put $500, $1,000 more dollars in an entrepreneur's pocket. That really moves the needle for a lot of small businesses. So I fully support that. Hope a lot of people take the challenge, and hope they'll check out Venture for America as well.
Thanks so much, Aaron.
As I mentioned in the intro before we do that outro, here is my conversation with Jenny Sharp. She has been helping Thrill Mill in all their efforts, including the recent success of Thrival 2016. Here's the interview. Hope you enjoy.
I found out about Venture for America from a fellow from 2014. He was in the student business incubator at the University of Wisconsin, and I went through that program with a startup of my own. And I heard about it, when I was, I think, a sophomore, and then not ever again. And I just always had it like in the back of my mind. And then senior year rolled up, and people were asking me what I was going to do, and I applied. So the job placement stuff all starts like during the year. So April and March and everything, I was already going on like job interviews and talking to companies, and I was already like accepted to the program. So and then I got an offer to work here in Pittsburgh and accepted actually the day before I graduated from college.
So what's your experience been like coming to Pittsburgh?
My experience coming to Pittsburgh has been unbelievably outstanding. I loved my time at training camp, and then I came here and the job was a perfect fit for me. In adjusting to professional life was really very smooth because I had had all this prep at training camp over the summer. And then I live in a house with 4 other fellows, and the rest of the fellows here in Pittsburgh all live within a mile of each other. So I had a sport team, and I had the right job, and I had the right training to get here, and I just couldn't have asked for a better transition into working.
How long is the fellowship, and how far into it are you?
The fellowship is 2 years long, and I just did training camp over the summer, so I'll graduate from the program in 2018 over the summer.
Have you started to think about goals for the future? You're obviously kind of entrepreneurially minded to be even attracted to a program like this, but given that you have some time remaining, is that something that you're already kind of thinking about and scheming for, or how do you process that?
Yeah, my goal was always to start my own company. That was always what I wanted to do. But, through college, I had tried to do this, and this was, I got into VFA thinking it's to start my own company. But now that I'm here and I'm working and I love where I'm working, that goal has maybe been pushed off a little bit to something that I don't need to be tinkering and starting something right now. I want to really commit and learn through the job I have.
It sounds like you would recommend VFA to others, but is there a specific type of person that you'd recommend it for, or is it something that you think would benefit a really broad amount of people?
I do think it would help a lot of people with starting their lives, but you have to want this, and you have to want to do the work. With my position and with my friends that are in the program, I mean, there's really, really long days, where you're working 12 hours, 14 hours, because you have so much responsibility in these startups. You're not a cog in a machine. If you don't do something, it doesn't get done. And you have to want to enter that kind of lifestyle. And you have to really want to care about your job. And if you're hoping to kind of slide by and stay under the radar, the VFA is not a good fit for you. But if you really are like a go-getter and you're very ambitious, then this is the route.
Have you had a best day or a worst day during your time so far in your fellowship?
I think my best day and my worst day was the same day.
Okay.
I ran one of Thrival's after parties. And when I got there, I was just way over my head, and I was starting to be like, I don't know how to do any of these things. I don't know how event's going to go and everything. And then by the end of it, everything turned out great. And a lot of people that attended had a great time. So, I was horrified and then I was happy to have gotten through it. And now I've grown so much as a person from that experience to try new things. So I kind of, that day in my fellowship stands out a lot.
Anything else that you want to mention about VFA that we didn't get a chance to talk about?
Venture for America is just so unique and such an amazing opportunity. And I really have no idea where I would have ended up had I not gotten into the program. And I think everyone in my class and previous classes feel the same way. I would have never found a 6-person startup in Pittsburgh had I not had this amazing opportunity. And the only person really to thank for that is Andrew Yang and the great work that he has done and how hard he works for his fellows. And you can just see that every time he speaks with us and every time he interacts with us in any way, that his passion for each one of us to be successful is amazing. And I really admire that. And I just think he's a great guy.
Can we plug any sort of social media or digital coordinates for people who want to connect with you and maybe learn more about VFA?
Yeah, people can connect with me on Facebook, I guess, as well as my email. If they want to send me an email and meet the fellows and talk to us about the program, they're more than welcome. My email is jennifer.e.sharp@gmail.com.
Cool. Well, that'll be linked to in the show notes. And thank you so much for sharing some time with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hey, thank you so much for sticking around through the entirety of that episode. Tried a little different format, and I hope that you enjoyed it. Also hope that you've hit subscribe and that you'll head on over to goingdeepwithaaron.com/join, where you can sign up for our newsletter, a source of digital content curation, the best podcasts, links, videos, and gadgets from the web delivered right to your inbox in a non-spammy, very classy way. You're not going to want to miss that or any of our forthcoming episodes, including an interview with Kwame Christian, a young man who has not only started his own law firm, but also founded the American Negotiation Institute. We talk about negotiating and how it is applicable and relevant for everybody's lives. That and more in forthcoming episodes of Going Deep with Aaron Watson.